Hello, I hope you are doing well. Today we are going to talk about the book Make Time: How to Focus on What Matters Every Day by Jake Knapp and John Zeratsky, published in New York by Currency, an imprint of the Crown Publishing Group, a division of Penguin Random House LLC, in 2018, and we will dig into what it is really trying to do. This is an independent summary, and under no circumstances does it replace reading the original work. Your life is not crammed because you are a rare genius in high demand. It is crammed because powerful systems quietly decided how you should spend your attention before you ever got a say. The authors start from this blunt premise and attack the modern cult of busyness and distraction, like product designers who finally admit the product is bow-silling its users' lives. Instead of treating you as a heroic multitasker in need of a better app, they treat you like a human with a finite brain, a tired body, and a calendar that has slowly been taken over by other people's emergencies and 1,000 digital slot machines. They introduce two main villains that set the whole tone of the book. First comes what they call the busy bandwagon, the cultural script that says a normal life is an overflowing inbox, back-to-back meetings, and to-do lists that never end, where your worth is measured by how frantic you look. The busy bandwagon runs on defaults. Meetings default to 30 or 60 minutes, calendars default to letting anyone drop something on your time, email and chat default to instant responses. And you are supposed to say yes because everyone else is drowning too. Then they bring in the infinity pools, their name for apps and media with endless streams of content, the pulls to refresh, scroll, and binge that never say enough, and turn your free hours into digital quicksand. If it refreshes on pull or streams on demand, they argue, it behaves like a pool with no edge, which is perfect for distracting a tired brain that thinks it deserves a break and ends up losing another evening. The brutal point is that both forces work as defaults, not active choices, which is exactly why they win. Just like a new phone ships with notifications turned on, social apps up front, and email ready to interrupt you, modern work ships with react to whatever appears as the standard operating system. Nobody sits down and decides the most important thing in my life is other people's whims. Yet that is the practical outcome once those defaults are left untouched for months and years. The authors insist willpower is a lousy weapon against this setup because software is designed to outlast your resistance and office culture is designed to reward availability, not depth. Classic productivity hacks do not fare much better in their view because shaving a minute here and there only lets more reactive work and more distractions rush and fill the gap, like trying to empty a leaking boat with a spoon. Their countermove is to treat your day as a design problem instead of a moral one. You are not lazy or broken. Your defaults are. Coming from years of building products at Gmail, YouTube, and other high-attention platforms, they know exactly how those defaults are engineered to keep you checking and scrolling. And they decide to turn the same design thinking back on their own lives. The idea is not to become a machine of output, but to quietly reset how your time is structured so that your attention naturally flows toward what you actually care about. The first big anecdote that sets the emotional stakes comes from Jake Knapp's living room in 2012. He describes sitting near his two sons, who are playing with a wooden train, one carefully assembling the track while the baby drools on a locomotive, while he is half present, half hypnotized by his iPhone. His older son looks up and casually asks why Dad is always staring at his phone, a question that hits harder than any productivity article because it exposes how being productive at work has quietly stolen the moments that were supposed to matter at home. At that point, Jake already thought of himself as a productivity pro, back home for dinner every night, inbox under control, tasks checked off like a champ. Yet under that polished surface, he realizes he spends his days reacting to other people's messages and requests, and his evenings letting his attention be chewed up by feeds and emails, while the long-term dream of writing a book never gets a full breath. In a spike of anger, mixed with shame, he nukes the usual suspects from his phone: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and eventually Gmail, the very app he once helped build. He expects withdrawal, social exile, maybe some kind of motivational crash, but what arrives instead is a quiet sense of relief, like suddenly noticing how loud the room had been only after the speakers go silent. Without the automatic reach for the phone, every time there is a microsecond of boredom, time with his kids slows down in a good way. And he starts to see how much of his life has been spent on defaults no one asked him to examine. The iPhone experiment becomes his proof that the problem is not your character. It is the environment you let run you on autopilot, and that environment can be redesigned. Soon after, Jake moves to Google Ventures and meets John Zeratsky, Jay-Z, who becomes his partner in this obsessive quest to rethink time. Jay-Z looks like the calm, put-together guy everyone secretly hates at first. Younger, apparently less stressed, shipping important work early while still having side projects and free evenings. Underneath the plaid shirts and relaxed schedule, though, he is another time dork who has grown disillusioned with the busy bandwagon and with the way infinity pools eat every unguarded minute. He talks about the system he believes must exist, a simple framework that would protect attention and energy by changing defaults rather than demanding superhuman willpower. And he brings in evolutionary psychology to explain why our ancient wiring is no match for modern notification storms. Together, they start running personal experiments that are both earnest and slightly ridiculous. Jay-Z plays with his news intake by cutting it down to once a week, rewires his sleep to become a morning person, cycles through eating patterns ranging from many small meals to 2 large ones, and samples different exercise routines from running to yoga to daily push-ups. Jake builds spreadsheets tracking his energy by the day to see the effects of coffee versus green tea, morning versus evening workouts, and how much being around people drains or fuels him. They are not trying to become ascetics. They are trying to run enough little experiments to see which changes actually free up time and focus for their own someday projects and people. The real laboratory, though, becomes the design sprint process Jake created inside Google and then ran with Jay-Z for more than 150 startup teams. A design sprint is basically a 5-day reboot of the work week, where a team cancels normal meetings and channels all its energy into solving one chosen problem through a precise schedule of activities. They notice how each day in a sprint has exactly one ambitious but clear target, from mapping the problem on Monday to testing a prototype with customers on Friday, and how that single daily focus gives people a rare feeling of completion and satisfaction when they reach the end of the day. They also watch what happens when devices are banned from the room. Once laptops and phones are removed, attention becomes the default rather than the exception, and the group simply does better thinking. Energy management turns out to be another key lesson from those sprints. The early versions of the process run on long hours and sugar, ending in exhausted teams and weak decisions by the end of the week, which forces them to redesign the schedule. With shorter days, deliberate breaks, walks, and healthier food, the work quality goes up, showing them that you do not brute force good decisions. You protect the energy required to make them. Finally, the sprint cycles teach them to think in experiments rather than commandments. Tweak one element, observe the results. Keep what works, discard what fails, and repeat. That stance of, this is data, not a verdict on my worth, becomes central to how they later advise readers to treat their own attempts to change how they use time. Out of this stew of frustration and nerdy testing, they extract the 4-step Make Time framework that structures the book. Step 1 is highlight, the daily act of choosing a single focal point that will matter most to you that day. Whether it is a work project, a personal chore with real meaning, or plain time with someone you love. Step 2 is laser, the menu of tactics for carving out focused, distraction-resistant time so that the highlight does not get eaten by infinity pools or random urgencies. Step 3 is Energize, which ties your ability to focus back to basic body care like movement, food, sleep, quiet, and real human contact, treating your body less like a tired transport device for your brain and more like its power source. Step 4 is Reflect, a simple nightly review of what worked and what did not, so you can adjust tactics and gradually build a system tailored to your own constraints and tendencies, instead of chasing someone else's routine. The authors go out of their way to say this is not a religion of optimization or a purity contest. Make Time is presented as a cookbook full of tactics that you are supposed to pick, test, and then either keep or discard depending on your results. They do not follow all of their own tactics all the time. Sometimes Jake binge watches a show or reinstalls email on his phone while traveling, and sometimes Jay-Z lets himself fall into Netflix for a while, which is their way of saying perfection is not the goal and will probably just become another infinity pool of self-criticism. The mindset they push is everyday rather than overhaul. Instead of training for a heroic life redesign, make small shifts that fit into your current reality and gradually move the center of gravity of your days toward what matters. The deepest structural idea hiding under all this is the highlight. To explain where it comes from, Jay-Z tells a story from a brutal Chicago winter around 2008, when he realizes that he cannot remember the last 2 months of his supposedly good life. Work is fine. His relationship is strong. Friends live nearby. From the outside, he is living the dream. But from the inside, the weeks have blurred into an unremarkable smear of email, tasks, and bad weather. Like any decent overachiever, he first tries solving the emptiness by becoming more productive, planning work carefully, clearing his inbox daily, and even carrying note cards to catch every idea so that no thinking time is wasted. That just accelerates the blur. The days fill with more and more small actions that leave no landmark in memory. He swings to the other extreme and builds 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and 10-year goals, even asking his girlfriend to align on them, which eventually works in the sense that she marries him, but still fails to fix the day-to-day feeling of drift. Long-term goals are too far away to pull him into the present, and they carry a hidden poison. The sense that life is a long audition for a future self who will finally be good enough when those goals are hit. What finally starts to work is embarrassingly simple: putting specific, meaningful activities into ordinary days. Regular Friday lunches with friends across town, runs along the lakefront after work, or sneaking out early on certain days to sail before sunset suddenly give his weeks shape and texture. The satisfaction he feels planning, anticipating, and then remembering these activities is strangely similar to the satisfaction of big work moments like a substantial presentation or a full day solving software bugs with engineers. Out of this, he and Jake distill the notion that humans live best when each day has at least one medium-sized event that matters, bigger than a 10-minute task and smaller than a 5-year dream. They argue that self-help has over-focused on goals at one end and microtasks at the other, ignoring this middle zone where actual lived satisfaction comes from. They decide to call this middle zone the highlight and to make it the anchor around which the rest of the system rotates. The practical question becomes, if someone asked you tonight, what was the highlight of your day? What do you want to be able to say? And how can you design today so that answer actually happens? The authors are explicit that the highlight is not your only obligation for the day, and it cannot magically erase email, bosses, kids, or bills. Its power lies in forcing you to be intentional with at least one slice of your attention and time, instead of living entirely on other people's priorities or algorithmic suggestions. They lean on research that shows subjective reality is largely driven by what you pay attention to. By giving your highlight your best shot of getting that attention, you gradually shift your felt experience of life, even if your external responsibilities remain the same. To choose highlights, they offer 3 simple criteria that function almost like 3 different lenses. The urgency lens asks, what absolutely has to get done today? The thing that would cause guilt or panic if it were still undone by tonight, such as a crucial client quote, a school project due tomorrow for your kid, or dinner you promised to cook for guests. The satisfaction lens asks, what would make me feel most proud or content at the end of the day, which often points to non-urgent projects that tend to get kicked in the future, like writing a chapter of a novel, drafting a proposal you care about, or planning a family trip. The joy lens asks, what would bring me the most joy today when I look back? And here they defend activities others might label as frivolous, like reading a novel, playing frisbee, or spending an unhurried lunch with a funny coworker, as long as they are chosen consciously rather than as default scrolling. They recommend picking one highlight per day, ideally something that takes about 60 to 90 minutes. Under an hour, it can be hard to drop into real focus. Beyond an hour and a half, most brains need a break, and most calendars will not tolerate that block easily. They reassure the reader that choosing is supposed to feel awkward at first, like using a muscle that has been left to rot by years of reacting, but that this awkwardness fades quickly as you practice. Nothing explodes if you pick wrong, because you get another shot tomorrow. And you can even change your highlight midday if life hits you with plumbing disasters or surprise headaches, as Jake describes doing when an ambitious editing plan collapses and he chooses enjoy dinner with friends as a late replacement. Once the concept is clear, they move into concrete, highlight tactics, starting with almost insultingly simple moves that they argue matter precisely because they are so stupidly doable. Tactic 1 is write it down, based on the stubborn observation that written intentions have a much better chance of becoming real behavior. They suggest turning the act of writing your highlight into a tiny ritual, either in the evening before bed or in the morning before the day takes over, like a private contract with yourself. The medium is flexible, from apps and calendars to notebooks, but their favorite is the humble sticky note that can be slapped on a laptop, fridge, or desk as a quiet but visible reminder of what you decided would matter today. Tactic 2, Groundhog It, plays with repetition rather than novelty. Borrowing the name from the film, where the same day repeats over and over, they tell you it is perfectly smart to pick the same highlight several days in a row. Maybe you simply did not get to yesterday's highlight, and it is still important. Maybe you started but did not finish and need another push. Maybe you are trying to build a new habit or skill that demands consistency rather than variety. Or maybe yesterday's highlight simply felt great and deserves an encore. Instead of treating every day like a blank reinvention of yourself, you let some themes run long enough to sink their teeth into your life. Tactic 3, Stack Rank Your Life, is their tool for those moments when picking a highlight feels like a cage match between competing identities and obligations. They have you list 3 to 10 big domains that matter to you across work, relationships, health, hobbies, finances, and personal growth, using short labels like family, work, get promoted, or painting. First, you just list without ranking. Then you fight your way to choosing what is number 1, followed by second, third, fourth, and fifth. They tell you to circle that number 1 in ink as a signal that, when in doubt, this area should get your highlight, recognizing that what is most important can and should change over months. Jake offers his own lists from 2017, where family first sits at the top and then gets pushed to second place for a period, while Make Time takes the front burner. Not because he stopped caring about his kids, but because the book suddenly needed focused attention while family routines were relatively stable. This example is deliberately uncomfortable. They want you to see that pretending all priorities are equal is a lie that keeps you scattered, and that sometimes being honest means admitting that, for a season, a specific project really does need more concentrated energy. The point is not to downgrade people or values permanently, but to remove the fog around where your highlights should usually land right now, instead of letting the loudest or most guilt-soaked areas win by default. Tactic 4, Batch the Little Stuff, tackles the classic anxiety that while you are protecting time for a highlight, dozens of minor tasks and messages are building up like dust bunnies. The authors admit they feel that same pull toward quick items, from catching up on delayed email after a trip to returning small calls that have been hanging over them. Their workaround is to occasionally treat a whole pile of small tasks as a single highlight, a kind of focused cleanup session where catch up on email or return phone calls becomes the big thing for the day. It sounds unglamorous, but they point out the surprising satisfaction of facing down all those nagging micro-obligations at once and clearing them out. The crucial rule is not to do this every day. Batching is the exception that justifies ignoring small, non-urgent tasks on other days because you know there is a time set aside to deal with them. Through these early chapters, the authors keep circling the same existential screwdriver. You do not beat the chaos of modern life by trying to do everything. You beat it by choosing which problems you are willing to own each day, and then designing your environment so those problems get your best time. They do not lecture you about being more inspired or positive. They quietly show how their own egos were like anxious dogs chasing every notification, and how they had to retrain those dogs, one small habit at a time, to sit and stay near the work and people that actually mattered. The whole tone is less optimize your life to become a shiny hero, and more your days are slipping by in a blur. Here is a practical way to stop that before the months go missing again. Tactic 5, the might-do list, starts by declaring war on the traditional to-do list, calling it a trap disguised as a productivity tool. Traditional lists pretend everything written on them will get done, which is a lie that breeds guilt and procrastination. Their alternative is to create a might-do list at the start of each day or week, where you brain dump every task floating around your head, from replying to a friend's email to fixing the leaky sink to starting that presentation, but without the toxic promise that these things will all be finished. Once the list exists, you scan it and choose just 1 or 2 items that can become today's highlight, while the rest remain possibilities that might happen if energy and time allow. The psychological shift is subtle but real. Instead of failing to finish a to-do list, you succeed in choosing what matters and treat everything else as optional bonus rounds. Tactic 6, the burner list, is their adaptation of a system Jay-Z developed over years of personal tweaking, inspired by the 4 burners on a stove. You divide a sheet of paper into 3 columns. A narrow left column labeled back burner, a wide middle column for your main project, and a narrow right column for a secondary project. The back burner holds all the small and medium tasks that are real but not urgent, the kind of things you would put on a traditional list. The main middle column, labeled with the name of your most important current project, becomes the home for all the steps and tasks related to that work, whether it is writing a book chapter, preparing a product launch, or planning a wedding. The right column does the same for a secondary project that still deserves some energy but is clearly less central. The magic of the burner list, in their view, is that it forces you to acknowledge that you cannot run 4 burners at high heat simultaneously without setting your kitchen on fire. By visually separating your main focus, your secondary effort, and the background hum of life admin, you stop lying to yourself about capacity. Each day, your highlight comes from one of the 2 projects, or occasionally from the back burner if something there suddenly becomes urgent. When a project finishes or stalls, you can cross it out, pick a new one from the back burner to move into a project column, and keep cycling. Jay-Z admits he creates a fresh burner list every few days as tasks get checked off or added, treating it as a living document rather than a monument. Tactic 7, run a personal sprint, applies the 5-day design sprint structure to individual life. Instead of a team solving a company problem, you block out 5 consecutive days, often a work week, and dedicate all of them to completing one major project or goal that has been sitting on your someday shelf. It could be drafting a business plan, deep cleaning and reorganizing your home, building a prototype for a side venture, or writing the first act of a screenplay. The idea is that by committing to 5 days in a row, you get the compounding benefits of momentum and immersion that scattered afternoons never provide. They warn this tactic is intense and requires either clearing your calendar or taking time off, so it is not for everyday use. But they argue it is a powerful occasional tool for making real progress on dreams that otherwise live in permanent limbo. After covering how to choose a highlight, the book shifts to tactics for actually making time to do the thing you chose. Because picking is useless if your calendar and environment then conspire to block it. Tactic 8, schedule your highlight, is brutally simple. Open your calendar and put your highlight on it as an actual appointment with a start time and duration. They point out that we instinctively schedule meetings with other people because those feel real, but rarely schedule time for ourselves, which signals that our own priorities are negotiable while everyone else's are not. By treating your highlight like a meeting that cannot be moved, you create a psychological and logistical barrier that protects it from the usual instrument of reactive work. Jake describes scheduling his highlight first thing in the morning when his energy is highest, while Jay-Z sometimes picks the end of the day as a reward for getting through other obligations. Tactic 9. Block your calendar goes a step further by filling in the spaces around your highlight with blocks of time for other categories of work, even if you do not yet know the exact tasks. For example, you might block 9 to 10 a.m. for email, 10 a.m. to noon for your highlight, noon to 1 p.m. for lunch, 1 to 3 p.m. for meetings, and 3 to 5 p.m. for project work. The goal is not rigid adherence, but preventing your calendar from looking like an open buffet where anyone can drop a meeting into any slot. When someone asks for your time and your calendar shows blocks, you are forced to make a conscious trade rather than passively accepting whatever request arrives. Tactic 10. Bulldoze your calendar is their nuclear option for people whose schedules have already been colonized by other people. They tell you to open your calendar, look at the next week or two, and start canceling or rescheduling meetings that are not truly essential. They acknowledge this feels rude and risky, but they insist most meetings are less critical than they appear, and that the worst outcome is usually someone getting mildly annoyed rather than a professional catastrophe. Jake shares a story of working with a startup CEO who had 60 hours of meetings on his calendar for a single sprint week. Together, they canceled or delegated 40 hours of those meetings, and the CEO reported that nothing bad happened, and the week became one of his most productive ever. Tactic 11, flake it till you make it, leans into strategic last-minute cancellations. They admit this sounds terrible and goes against social norms, but they argue that sometimes you only realize a meeting or commitment is unnecessary once the day arrives and you see what else is competing for your energy. Instead of dragging yourself to something out of guilt, they give you permission to send a polite message saying you cannot make it, and trust that the world will adjust. The trick is to use this sparingly and genuinely, not as a regular flake move that destroys your reputation, but as an escape valve when protecting your highlight truly matters more than showing up to something marginal. Tactic 12, just say no, is about building a reflex to decline new requests before they land on your calendar. They observe that most people say yes by default, especially at work, because no feels confrontational or like admitting you are not capable. Their reframe is that every yes to someone else is an automatic no to your own. Highlight and priorities. So the question is not whether you are saying no, but to whom. They recommend practicing simple scripts like, I do not have the bandwidth right now, or that does not fit my focus this week, delivered without long justifications that invite negotiation. The more you say no to things that do not matter, the more room you create for things that do. Tactic 13, design your day, asks you to sketch a rough ideal schedule the night before, mapping when you will do your highlight and what the surrounding hours might look like. It is less rigid than blocking a calendar and more like setting an intention. Tomorrow morning, I will write from 8 to 10, then handle email and calls until lunch, then have a meeting in the afternoon, then go for a run. They admit real life will disrupt this plan, but having the design in mind makes it much easier to notice when you are drifting into reactive mode and to steer yourself back. Jay-Z describes using this as a nightly wind-down ritual, where thinking through the next day also helps him let go of today. Tactic 14, become a morning person, argues that early hours are often the most defended time in a day because the world has not yet woken up to make demands on you. They are not preaching 4 a.m. wake-ups or heroic routines. They simply point out that if you can shift your schedule to start an hour earlier, that hour is usually quieter and more controllable than any hour later in the day. Jay-Z shares how he slowly moved his wake time from 8 a.m. to 6 a.m. by going to bed earlier and adjusting in 15-minute increments, which gave him a consistent morning window for his highlight before work started. They add that this tactic only works if you actually go to bed earlier. Trying to become a morning person by just sleeping less is a recipe for exhaustion and failure. Tactic 15, nighttime is highlight time, is the mirror image for people whose energy and freedom peak in the evening. Some people are wired or constrained in ways that make mornings impossible, whether because of young kids, shift work, or simple biology. For them, the sweet spot might be after dinner, once the household calms down, or late at night when distractions finally stop. Jake describes seasons of his life when he did his writing between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m., accepting that this meant less TV and earlier bedtimes, but gaining the satisfaction of finishing chapters. The lesson is to find the time that actually works for you rather than forcing yourself into someone else's idealized schedule. Tactic 16. Quit when you are done is about giving yourself permission to stop working once your highlight is complete, even if there are hours left in the official workday or evening. The usual pattern is to finish something meaningful and then immediately fill the remaining time with busy work, email, or mindless browsing, which trains your brain that there is no reward for focus. Their suggestion is to treat finishing your highlight as a finish line that lets you walk away, go outside, read a book, or just be done, which creates positive reinforcement and makes tomorrow's highlight feel less like a chore. They acknowledge this is easier for people with flexible jobs, but even those with fixed schedules can mentally check out and shift to low-stakes tasks once the main event is done. After laying out these highlight tacks, the book pivots hard into the laser section, where the authors stop being polite about technology and start explaining why your devices and apps are actively designed to break your focus. They open with a confession from Jake about his complicated emotional relationship with email, which he loved as a user, and then spent years refining as a designer on the Gmail team. He describes features like Priority Inbox, which automatically sorted important messages to the top, as genuinely helpful inventions meant to make people's lives easier. But over time, he watched email evolve from a tool into a compulsion, where checking became reflexive and constant, and where the ease of access on phones meant there was never a moment when you were truly away from the inbox. Jay-Z adds a similar story about YouTube, explaining how the platform's recommendations and autoplay were designed to keep people engaged, which sounds neutral until you realize engaged is a euphemism for unable to stop watching. The engineers and designers building these features, including him, were not villains. They were trying to make products people loved and would use more, which happens to align perfectly with business models built on attention and advertising. The result is a set of apps and services so polished at capturing your focus that relying on willpower to resist them is like trying to outswim a riptide. This is where they introduce the concept of infinity pools in detail. An infinity pool is any app or service where there is always more content, always something new, and no natural stopping point. Social media feeds refresh endlessly. Streaming services queue the next episode automatically. News sites update constantly. Email and messaging apps expect instant replies and never say you are done for today. They are called pools because you can dive in and just keep swimming, or more accurately, keep treading water until you are exhausted and have no idea how much time passed. The authors argue these infinity pools are hard to resist for deep psychological reasons rooted in how human brains evolved. Our ancestors survived by being alert to novelty, by checking for threats and opportunities constantly, and by seeking social information about the tribe. Notifications, likes, breaking news, and endless feeds hijack those ancient systems, delivering tiny, unpredictable rewards that trigger the same circuits as a slot machine. The companies building these products employ thousands of very smart people whose job is to make the experience as frictionless and compelling as possible. So any user trying to moderate their usage is fighting a massively one-sided battle. Their answer is not to wait for the technology industry to voluntarily become less addictive, which they flatly say will never happen, and not to rely on willpower, which they know from experience fails under pressure. Instead, they return to the designer's mindset. Change the defaults, add friction, and redesign your environment so that distraction becomes harder to access than focus. They call this creating barriers, small obstacles that make infinity pools slightly less convenient and therefore slightly less automatic, which turns out to be enough to break the reflex. The laser tactics start with the biggest source of distraction for most people, the smartphone, and they group these under the heading, "Be the boss of your phone." Tactic 17. Try a distraction-free phone is Jake's original move of deleting social media, email, web browsers, and news apps from the device. What remains is a phone that can still make calls, send texts, use maps, play music, and take photos, which covers the core utility without the infinity pools. They admit this sounds extreme, but they insist it is shockingly easy once you try it, and that the relief of not being tethered to feeds and inboxes is immediate. For people worried about emergencies or losing access to something critical, they suggest trying it for just one day or one weekend as an experiment to see what happens. Tactic 18. Log out is a softer version for those not ready to delete apps entirely. Simply log out of social media, email, and other infinity pool apps after each use, so that opening them again requires typing in a password. That small barrier, a few extra seconds, and the mild annoyance of remembering a password is often enough to interrupt the automatic reach for the app when you are bored or anxious. Jake points out that he kept his social media apps installed for a while, but stayed logged out, and he found himself checking them far less often, simply because the friction made the reward not worth it. Tactic 19, Nix notifications, tells you to turn off all notifications except for actual phone calls and texts from real humans you care about. No email alerts, no social media pings, no news updates, no app badges showing little red numbers. Notifications, they argue, are designed to break your focus and drag your attention back to the app, and leaving them on is like letting someone walk up and tap you on the shoulder every few minutes all day long. Turning them off means your phone only interrupts you when you choose to pick it up, which restores a baseline of control. Tactic 20, clear your home screen, involves moving most or all apps off the first screen you see when you unlock your phone. Instead of seeing a grid of colorful icons begging to be tapped, you see empty space or maybe a simple wallpaper image. If you want to use an app, you have to swipe to another screen or use search to find it, which again adds a moment of friction that interrupts the reflex. Jay-Z describes keeping only his calendar and a to-do list on his home screen, tools that support his highlight rather than distract from it. Tactic 21, wear a wristwatch, addresses the problem that many people check their phone just to see the time, and then end up opening 3 apps and losing 10 minutes. By putting the time on your wrist, you remove the excuse that forces you to touch the device, which means the phone can stay in your pocket or bag far more often. They half joke that this is the most old-fashioned advice in the book, but they insist it works, and that a cheap digital watch does the job just fine. Tactic 22, leave devices behind, is the most radical phone tactic. Just do not bring it. Go for a walk without it. Run errands without it. Even leave it at home when you go to work if your job allows. They acknowledge this triggers anxiety in a culture that assumes constant availability, but they argue the anxiety fades quickly once you realize the world does not collapse if you are unreachable for a few hours. Jake describes going on a phone-free vacation with his family, where at first everyone felt phantom vibrations and reached for devices that were not there. But by day 3, they had all relaxed into longer conversations and more presence. The next cluster of laser tactics moves beyond the phone itself to tackle specific types of digital traps, under the heading, Stay Out of Infinity Pools. Tactic 23, skip the morning check-in, takes aim at the habit of reaching for your phone as soon as you wake up. The authors explain that opening email, news, or social feeds in the first moments of your day immediately puts you into reactive mode, handing control of your attention over to whatever arrived overnight. By postponing this check until after you have had breakfast, showered, or maybe even started your highlight, you protect your morning energy and set the tone that you are in charge, not your inbox. They suggest leaving the phone in another room at night, which they cover in more detail later, or at least putting it out of arm's reach so you have to physically get up to check it. Tactic 24, block distraction kryptonite, is about identifying the 1 or 2 specific apps or websites that are your personal weaknesses. For Jake, it was Twitter. For Jay-Z, it was news sites. Once you know your kryptonite, you block it aggressively using tools like Freedom, self-control, or browser extensions that simply prevent the site from loading during certain hours or altogether. They emphasize that willpower fails against kryptonite because the pull is emotional and chemical. You need a wall, not a promise. Tactic 25, ignore the news, challenges the idea that being informed requires constant updates. They argue most news is noise designed to trigger anxiety or outrage rather than provide actionable information, and that checking headlines multiple times a day creates a low-grade stress that drains mental energy. Jay-Z describes switching to a weekly news digest or a physical newspaper on weekends, finding that he missed almost nothing of real importance, but gained hours of calm focus during the week. If something truly massive happens, like a natural disaster or war, you will hear about it from other people anyway. Tactic 26, put your toys away. Treats distraction devices like literal toys that belong in a toy box when not in use. It means physically hiding your iPad, game console, or even TV remote inside a drawer or closet so they are not visible visual cues triggering you to play. When you have to open a cabinet and dig out the device, you are making a conscious choice to use it rather than just grabbing it because it was sitting on the coffee table. This applies the friction principle to physical space. Tactic 27, fly without Wi-Fi, reframes air travel as a rare sanctuary for deep work. Instead of paying for slow, frustrating in-flight internet to keep up with email, they suggest embracing the disconnection. Being stuck in a metal tube at 30,000 feet with no signal is one of the few times modern life forces you offline, making it perfect for reading, writing, or thinking deeply about a highlight. They admit it takes a mental shift to see boredom on a plane as a gift rather than a problem to be solved with screens. Tactic 28, put a timer on the internet, acknowledges that sometimes you need the web for work, but getting sucked into rabbit holes is inevitable. Their solution is to use a physical timer or an app that cuts off your access after a set period, say 30 minutes. When the timer goes off or the internet blocks itself, you are snapped out of the trance. This turns internet usage from an open-ended drift into a finite session with a clear endpoint. Tactic 29, cancel the internet, is the nuclear option for home productivity. Jay-Z describes a period where he literally canceled his home internet service, relying only on his phone's limited data plan or going to coffee shops when he needed to be online. This turned his apartment into a quiet zone where digital distraction was almost impossible, which massively boosted his writing output and reading time. While extreme and perhaps not viable for everyone, especially remote workers, it illustrates their core philosophy. If the environment is the problem, change the environment radically until it supports the behavior you want. Tactic 30. Watch out for time craters. Warns about small distractions that leave big holes in your day. A quick check of Twitter might only take 5 minutes, but the emotional residue, outrage at a headline, envy of a photo, annoyance at a comment, can linger for half an hour, ruining your focus long after the app is closed. They call these time craters because the damage is much wider than the initial impact. Recognizing which apps leave craters versus which ones are clean breaks helps you decide what to block entirely. Tactic 31, trade fake wins for real wins, attacks the feeling of productivity you get from clearing notifications or emptying an inbox. These are fake wins because they feel good in the moment but do not move your actual life goals forward. They are just maintenance. Real wins come from doing your highlight, from making something, or from spending quality time with people. They urge you to catch yourself chasing the dopamine hit of a clean inbox and consciously redirect that energy toward a messy but meaningful project. Tactic 32, turn distractions into tools, suggests selectively reinstalling apps for specific purposes and then deleting them again. If you need Facebook to look up an event, install it, find the event, and delete it. If you need Twitter to post an announcement, install, post, delete. This keeps the utility of the tool without letting it set up camp on your phone as a permanent infinity pool. It sounds tedious, but that tedium is exactly the friction that prevents mindless checking later. Tactic 33, become a fair weather fan, applies the same logic to sports. Following a team through every game of a long season consumes hundreds of hours. They suggest giving yourself permission to only watch the big games, the playoffs, or the finals, or to just check scores occasionally. you can still enjoy the drama and connection of fandom without letting the league's schedule dictate your weekends for half the year. The next laser section, Slow Your Inbox, is dedicated entirely to email, which they identify as the biggest professional infinity pool. Tactic 34, Deal with Email at the End of the Day, proposes shifting your main email processing time to the late afternoon. By waiting until then, you ensure your best morning energy goes to your highlight, and you often find that urgent morning threads have resolved themselves by 4 p.m. It also creates a natural deadline. You want to go home, so you process faster. Tactic 35, Schedule Email Time, treats email like any other task that deserves a block on your calendar. Instead of keeping the inbox open all day as a background radiation of stress, you close it and only open it during scheduled slots, say 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. This batches the context switching and prevents the constant ping, check, resume cycle that shreds concentration. Tactic 36, Empty Your Inbox Once a Week, is their alternative to the daily inbox zero obsession. Trying to hit zero every day is a treadmill that never stops. Instead, they suggest simply letting emails pile up, scanning for true emergencies, of course, and then doing a big purge once a week. This reduces the pressure to be constantly processing and accepts that most email is not actually urgent. Tactic 37, Pretend Messages Are Letters, asks you to mentally reframe email as slow mail rather than instant chat. Letters used to take days or weeks to arrive and be answered, and civilization survived. By adopting a letter mindset, you reduce the internal panic that you must reply immediately, which in turn trains your correspondents not to expect instant responses from you. Tactic 38, Be Slow to Respond, is the practical application of the letter mindset. When you reply instantly, you train people that you are always available, which generates more email. When you reply slowly, within 24 to 48 hours, or longer for non-urgent stuff, you lower expectations and often find that people solve their own problems while waiting. They admit this can be scary professionally, but argue that most people value thoughtful, reliable answers over instant, frantic ones. Tactic 39, Reset Expectations, involves explicitly telling colleagues or clients about your new email habits. A simple, I'm checking email less often to focus on deep work, so if something is truly urgent, please call or text me, can work wonders. Most people respect the desire to focus, and giving them an emergency channel, which they will rarely use, calms their anxiety about you being unreachable. Tactic 40, Set Up Send Only Email, is a hack for when you need to send messages but do not want to see your inbox. You can configure email clients to hide the incoming mail pane, or use a separate account just for sending. This lets you fire off necessary communications without getting sucked into the new demands waiting in your inbox. Tactic 41, Vacation Off the Grid, urges you to truly disconnect when on vacation. Delete the email app, set an autoresponder that says you are not checking, and maybe that you will delete all emails received during this time, though that is the extreme version, and actually be away. They argue that half-disconnected vacations where you just check in are not vacations at all. They are just working remotely from a nicer location with more guilt. Tactic 42, Lock Yourself Out, involves using software or even asking a friend to change your password if you simply cannot stop checking. Jay-Z shares a story of locking himself out of his own accounts for a weekend to force a break. It is heavy-handed, but effective if your willpower is completely shot. The Make TV a Sometimes Treat section tackles the living room infinity pool. Tactic 43, Don't Watch the News, reiterates the earlier point specifically for TV news, which they describe as a highly polished anxiety delivery system. Visual news is even more emotionally manipulative than text news, and they advise cutting it out completely. Tactic 44, Put Your TV in the Corner, suggests moving the television away from the center of the room. If furniture is arranged around the TV, watching it becomes the default group activity. If the TV is in a corner or hidden in a cabinet, and the furniture faces each other, conversation or reading becomes the new default. Tactic 45, Ditch Your TV for a projector, is a clever hardware swap. A projector has to be set up, plugged in, and focused, and requires a dark room. This friction means you only use it when you really want to watch a movie or show, turning viewing into an intentional event rather than background noise. Plus, the quality is cinematic, making the experience better when you do choose it. Tactic 46, go a la carte instead of all you can eat, advises canceling cable and streaming subscriptions that offer endless channels or libraries, and instead buying or renting individual movies or shows. Paying $4 for a specific movie makes you value it more and prevents the zombie scrolling through Netflix trying to find something to watch. It breaks the default of watching TV and replaces it with watching a specific film. Tactic 47. If you love something, set it free, suggests temporarily canceling subscriptions like Netflix if you find yourself binging too much. You can always resubscribe later when a specific new season comes out, watch it, and then cancel again. This treats the service as a store you visit rather than a utility that is always running in your house. The final laser section, Find Flow, offers tactics for getting into the zone once you have cleared the distractions. Tactic 48, shut the door, is literal and symbolic. If you have an office door, close it. If not, use headphones, even without music, as a do not disturb sign. It signals to others and to yourself that you are in focus mode. Tactic 49, invent a deadline, tricks your brain into focus by creating artificial urgency. Even if the real deadline is weeks away, tell yourself you have to finish a draft by Friday afternoon. Or schedule a review with a friend or colleague for that time, which turns the fake deadline into a real social commitment. Tactic 50, explode your highlight, breaks a big, intimidating highlight into tiny, actionable steps. Write chapter is scary and vague. Open document, type title, write first paragraph are small and doable. Breaking it down lowers the barrier to entry and helps you get started, which is usually the hardest part. Tactic 51, play a laser soundtrack, suggests finding a specific album, song, or type of noise, like white noise or coffee shop sounds, that you play only when you want to focus. Over time, your brain associates that sound with deep work and automatically shifts gears when it hears it. Jake uses a specific repetitive album on loop. Jay-Z likes silence or ambient noise. Tactic 52, set a visible timer, involves using a dedicated timer, like the time timer, which shows time as a disappearing red disk, to make the passage of time concrete. Seeing exactly how much time is left in your focus block helps keep you on task and creates a sense of containment. I only have to focus for 20 more minutes. Tactic 53, avoid the lure of fancy tools, warns against falling into the trap of thinking you need better software or pens to do your work. Setting up the perfect productivity system is often just a sophisticated form of procrastination. Stick to simple, boring tools that you already know how to use, so the tool disappears and only the work remains. Tactic 54, start on paper, advises beginning creative work away from screens entirely. Sketching, outlining, or drafting on paper engages different parts of the brain and prevents you from getting distracted by formatting, notifications, or the urge to edit as you go. Once the core idea is down on paper, you can move to the computer to refine it. The Stay in the Zone cluster helps you maintain focus once you have started. Tactic 55, make a random question list, is a defense against the urge to Google things mid-work. When you wonder who won the 1994 World Series or what is the weather tomorrow, instead of opening a browser tab and getting lost, write the question on a piece of paper next to you. Promise yourself you will look it up later during a break. Often, by the time the break comes, you do not care anymore. Tactic 56, notice one breath, brings mindfulness into the moment of distraction. When you feel the urge to break focus or check your phone, pause and take just one conscious breath, feeling the air go in and out. That tiny pause is often enough to reset your attention and give you the choice to stay on task instead of reacting automatically. Tactic 57, be bored, encourages you to embrace moments of boredom without filling them. Waiting in line, sitting on a bus, waiting for a meeting to start. Let your mind wander instead of checking your phone. Boredom, they argue, is the breeding ground for creativity and problem solving. If you never let your brain idle, it never has time to connect disparate ideas. Tactic 58, be stuck, normalizes the feeling of hitting a wall in your work. Instead of panicking and switching to an easier task like email when things get hard, just sit there. Stare at the screen or the paper. Accept that being stuck is part of the process. Often, if you refuse to flee, the solution will present itself after a few minutes of discomfort. Tactic 59. Take a day off. Sounds counterintuitive for productivity, but they insist that sometimes the best way to regain focus is to completely step away. If you are grinding and getting nowhere, your battery might just be dead. Give yourself permission to stop, rest, and come back tomorrow with fresh eyes. Tactic 60, go all in, suggests that sometimes the best way to focus is to overcommit. If you are struggling to make progress on a highlight, try devoting an entire weekend or even a week, a personal sprint, to it. The sheer intensity of the commitment can break through resistance and generate a flow state that small daily slots cannot match. The book then transitions to the third big pillar, Energize. The authors argue that time management is useless if you are a zombie during the hours you saved. Your brain is a biological machine that runs on glucose, oxygen, and rest, not just willpower. They introduce the idea that modern life has accidentally designed an environment hostile to human energy. We sit too much, eat processed trash, stare at blue light, and isolate ourselves, all of which drains the battery. To fix this, they suggest thinking like a caveman, not living in a cave, but asking what our ancient bodies were evolved to do: move, eat real food, sleep, socialize, and trying to mimic those conditions in modern life. The Keep It Moving section focuses on physical activity, but not in the go to the gym for an hour sense. Tactic 61, exercise every day, but don't be a hero, sets the bar low. Just move your body for about 20 minutes daily. It does not have to be intense. A walk, a few push-ups, or climbing stairs counts. The goal is brain function and mood, not six-pack abs. Research shows even mild exercise boosts cognitive performance and energy levels significantly. Tactic 62, pound the pavement, specifically recommends walking. It is the most natural human movement, requires no equipment, and clears the head. Walking meetings, walking to work, or just a walk around the block can reset a tired brain better than caffeine. Tactic 63, inconvenience yourself, encourages building movement into daily life by choosing the harder option. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. Park far away from the store entrance. Carry a basket instead of using a cart. Cook dinner instead of ordering out. These small inconveniences add up to significant movement without requiring a dedicated workout slot on your calendar. Tactic 64, squeeze in a super short workout is for busy days. The 7-minute workout, a specific high-intensity circuit, or just doing a set of burpees in your living room can give you a surprising energy boost in almost no time. It eliminates the "I do not have time to exercise" excuse. The Eat Real Food section cuts through diet fad noise with caveman logic. Tactic 65, eat like a hunter-gatherer, is their baseline advice. Eat plants, nuts, fish, and meat. Avoid processed stuff that comes in boxes with long ingredient lists. They do not push a strict paleo brand, but the general principle that your body knows how to process whole foods and gets confused and sluggish on refined sugars and industrial grains. The energy crash after a heavy processed lunch is a productivity killer, so eating clean is actually a time management strategy. Tactic 66, central park your plate, is a visual rule of thumb. Imagine your plate is a map of Manhattan. The salad/vegetables should take up the space of Central Park, a huge chunk in the middle, and the other stuff, meat, starch, should be the buildings around the edges. Prioritizing veggies ensures steady energy release rather than spikes and crashes. Tactic 67, stay hungry, challenges the fear of emptiness. They suggest experimenting with intermittent fasting or just skipping a meal occasionally. The mild alertness that comes from hunger, an evolutionary adaptation to help us hunt, is often better for focus than the food coma that follows a big meal. They clarify this is not about starving, but about realizing you do not need to be constantly full to function. Tactic 68, snack like a toddler, is about quality control for snacks. If you must snack, choose things a healthy toddler would eat: fruit, nuts, carrot sticks. Avoid the grown-up vending machine trash of chips and candy bars. High-quality fuel keeps the engine running smooth. Junk fuel gums it up. Tactic 69, go on the dark chocolate plan, is their concession to the sweet tooth. Dark chocolate, high cocoa content, low sugar, satisfies the craving for a treat without the insulin spike of milk chocolate or candy. It also contains a bit of caffeine and theobromine for a mild mental boost. Replacing dessert with a square of dark chocolate is a sustainable habit swap. The Optimize Caffeine section treats coffee as a powerful drug that most people use incorrectly. Tactic 70, wake up before you caffeinate, advises waiting 60 to 90 minutes after waking before having your first cup. In the morning, your body naturally produces cortisol to wake you up. Adding caffeine on top of that is redundant and breeds tolerance. Wait until cortisol levels dip mid-morning for the maximum effect. Tactic 71, caffeinate before you crash, explains the timing of the infamous afternoon slump. If you wait until you are already exhausted to drink coffee, it is too late. The adenosine, the sleepiness chemical, has already docked in your brain. Have your coffee about 30 minutes before your usual energy dip, say, right after lunch, to block the adenosine receptors before the crash hits. Tactic 72, take a caffeine nap, is a power user trick. Drink a cup of coffee and immediately take a 15-minute nap. The caffeine takes about 20 minutes to hit your bloodstream. The nap clears out some adenosine naturally. When you wake up, the nap's refreshment and the caffeine's kick hit simultaneously, making you feel superhuman. Tactic 73, maintain altitude with green tea, suggests switching to green tea in the afternoon. It has less caffeine than coffee and also contains L-theanine, which promotes a calm, steady focus rather than the jittery spike of espresso. This helps you stay alert without wrecking your sleep later. Tactic 74, turbo your highlight, involves timing your caffeine intake to coincide specifically with your highlight block. If you plan to write at 8 a.m., have your coffee at 7:45 a.m. Use the drug to fuel the most important work, not just to survive a boring meeting. Tactic 75, learn your last call, is about sleep hygiene. Figure out the time of day after which caffeine ruins your sleep. For many people, it is as early as noon or 2 p.m. And strictly stop drinking it then. Caffeine has a long half-life. Drinking it at 5 p.m. means half of it is still in your system at 11 p.m., wrecking your deep sleep quality even if you fall asleep fine. Tactic 76, disconnect sugar, warns that sugary drinks and snacks are often paired with caffeine, like lattes or soda. The sugar crash will undermine the caffeine boost. Take your caffeine black or with fat, milk cream, but cut the sugar to avoid the energy roller coaster. The go off the grid section encourages disconnecting to recharge. Tactic 77, get woodsy, tells you to go into nature. Even a few minutes in a park or staring at trees reduces stress hormones and replenishes attention capacity. The Japanese practice of forest bathing is backed by science, showing that nature exposure lowers heart rate and blood pressure. Tactic 78, trick yourself into meditating, offers meditation for people who hate meditation. Use an app like Headspace or Calm, or just do a simple breathing exercise while on the bus or walking. You do not need to sit on a cushion for an hour. Even small moments of mindfulness reboot the brain. Tactic 79, leave your headphones at home, suggests walking or commuting without audio input sometimes. Constantly pumping podcasts or music into your ears prevents your brain from processing the day's events and wandering into creative territory. Silence allows the default mode network of the brain to activate, which is where insights come from. Tactic 80, take real breaks, means breaks without screens. Switching from a spreadsheet to Instagram is not a break for your brain. It is just a different kind of visual processing. A real break involves looking out a window, walking, talking to a human, or closing your eyes. Give your visual cortex a rest. The Make It Personal section emphasizes social energy. Tactic 81, spend time with your tribe, reminds us that humans are social animals who get energy from face-to-face connection. Spending time with friends or family who make you feel good is a net energy gain, unlike the drain of social media connection. Prioritize hanging out with people who make you laugh or think. Tactic 82, eat without screens, reclaims mealtime as a social or mindful space. Eating while scrolling or watching TV disconnects you from the food and the people you are with. Eating with attention is more satisfying and allows for conversation, which is a key energy source. The final Energize cluster, Sleep in a Cave, is about optimizing the bedroom for rest. Tactic 83, make your bedroom a bedroom, means removing non-sleep activities from that space. No TV, no desk, no piles of laundry. The bedroom should signal sleep to your brain instantly. This psychological association helps fight insomnia. Tactic 84, fake the sunset, deals with blue light. Screens and bright LED bulbs trick our brains into thinking it is still noon, suppressing melatonin. Dim the lights in your house an hour or two before bed. Use night shift modes on devices, or better yet, put them away. And create a twilight environment that tells your body it is time to wind down. Tactic 85, sneak a nap, rehabilitates napping as a productivity tool, not laziness. A 20-minute nap can restore alertness better than more coffee. Find a quiet corner, set a timer, and even if you do not fall asleep fully, the rest helps. Tactic 86, don't jet lag yourself, warns against sleeping in huge amounts on weekends to catch up. This shifts your circadian rhythm and makes Monday morning brutal, social jet lag. Try to keep your wake-up time relatively consistent within an hour or so, even on weekends, to keep your body clock stable. Tactic 87, put on your own oxygen mask first, is a permission slip for parents and caregivers. You cannot take care of others well if you are broken. Prioritizing your own sleep, food, and exercise is not selfish. It is the necessary maintenance that allows you to be patient and present for everyone else. The final step of the make time loop is reflect, covered in the section Fine-Tune Your Days with the Scientific Method. The authors argue that you cannot improve what you do not track. They propose a very simple daily logging habit. You do not need a complex journal, just jot down a few data points each evening. Did you do your highlight? How was your focus, laser? How was your energy? What tactics did you try? And did they work? This reflection closes the feedback loop. If you tried logging out of social media and it worked great, keep it. If you tried waking up early and felt like a zombie, drop it or tweak it. This scientific approach, hypothesis, experiment, data, conclusion, removes the emotion from failure. A failed tactic is just a result, not a character flaw. Over weeks and months, this process builds a customized user manual for your own life that is far more valuable than any generic advice. The book concludes with sample agendas and a quick start guide, reinforcing that there is no one right way to do make time. They show sample schedules for a parent, a student, an executive, showing how the blocks shift, but the principles, highlight, laser, energize, remain. They emphasize again that you should start small, maybe with just one tactic from each category, and build up. The goal is to look back at your days and feel like you actually lived them, rather than just got through them. The reflect section is not just an add-on. It is the engine that keeps the whole system from collapsing into a guilt trip. The authors know that most self-improvement plans fail because life happens. You get sick, work explodes, or you just have a lazy Tuesday. Without reflection, a bad day feels like, I failed, so I might as well quit. With reflection, a bad day is just a data point. Okay, yesterday I scored a 3 on energy because I stayed up late watching Netflix. Note to self, fake the sunset didn't happen. Let's try again today. It turns judgment into curiosity. They suggest keeping this log extremely low friction. A small notebook on the bedside table or a note on your phone is enough. The questions are binary or simple scales. Highlight, yes, no. Focus, 1 to 10. Energy, 1 to 10. They even include a grateful for line, stealing a bit of positive psychology to ensure you end the day scanning for good moments rather than just obsessing over tasks. This tiny dopamine hit of gratitude reinforces the habit of tracking. The sample agendas provided at the end act as proof of concept that this framework is flexible enough for different lives. They show a new parent schedule where the highlight happens during the baby's nap and energy is managed by napping when the baby naps. They show an office worker schedule where the highlight is blocked out first thing in the morning before meetings start and email is batched into 2 slots. They show a student schedule where focus blocks are interspersed with get woodsy walks to maintain cognitive load. This variety prevents the reader from saying, well, this works for 2 tech guys, but not for me. It shifts the burden back to the reader to design their own puzzle pieces. In the quick start guide, they boil the entire book down to a cheat sheet for day 1. 1. Choose a highlight. 2. Employ 1 laser tactic, like log out. 3. Do 1 energize tactic, like walk. 4. Reflect at night. This reductionism is intentional. They want to lower the barrier to entry so far that you feel silly not trying it. They explicitly say, don't try to do everything. This anti-perfectionism is their final defense against the all-or-nothing mindset that kills most habits. Author's main theses. 1. The default state is broken. Modern life, by default, is designed to steal your time and attention. The busy bandwagon, work culture, and infinity pools, distraction tech, are powerful systems that will automatically fill every minute of your day with reactive busyness and mindless scrolling unless you actively build barriers against them. You cannot willpower your way out of this. You must redesign your environment. 2. The highlight is the anchor. Satisfaction comes from doing one meaningful thing each day, not from clearing a to-do list. A highlight, 60 to 90 minutes, creates a focal point that gives the day a narrative and a sense of accomplishment, regardless of what else happens. It bridges the gap between long-term goals, too far away, and daily tasks, too trivial. 3. Attention management. Time management. The goal is not to squeeze more hours out of the day, efficiency, but to protect the quality of the hours you have, focus. Laser mode is achieved by creating friction for distractions, deleting apps, blocking calendars, so that focus becomes the path of least resistance. You control your attention by controlling your access to things that steal it. 4. Energy is biological. You cannot manage time if you ignore your biology. Energize tactics emphasize that cognitive performance relies on physical inputs, real food, movement, sleep, and social connection. Treating the body like a caveman's machine in a modern world restores the battery needed to focus. 5. Experimentation over perfection. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. The only way to find a sustainable system is to treat your life as a laboratory, reflect, testing different tactics, observing the results without judgment, and iterating. A failed day is just data, not a moral failure. Small, incremental shifts in defaults eventually compound into a life that feels chosen rather than endured. If the output is truncated or incomplete, note that the summary covers the core narrative and all major tactics presented in the text up to the conclusion of the book's structured advice. The book ends with resources and thank yous, which are not summarized here, as they contain no new conceptual material. That's it. I'm done. Thank you.